Action News Jax First Alert Weather presents the ins and outs of hurricane season.
Well, hello and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Chief Meteorologist Mike Burrish, the entire First Alert Weather team here to talk you through the ins and outs of the hurricane season.
I'm certified broadcast meteorologist Garrett Edenbaugh.
And I'm certified broadcast meteorologist Corey Sima.
And I'm meteorologist Alyssa Pedjick. We have lots to cover, so let's get right to it.
There is a whole lot to cover considering the year that we've just come out of, the hurricane season of 2020, including but not limited to hurricane chasing, a home protected by, wait for it, hay bales, the latest and greatest forecasting technology, and the so-called storm of the century, the most powerful hurricane to ever hit Florida. We begin with the names of the 2021 hurricane season: Anna, Bill, Claudette, Danny, Elsa, the first few names on the hurricane season list. Anna was already used back in the middle of May, so Bill will be the new name and the second name for the hurricane season. Hopefully, we're not like last year going to exhaust this entire list of names, because last year, of course, being a very busy season. This one ahead, also potentially very active.
Everything's pointing to some sort of neutral to La Nina situation. What that means is at least average to busier than average season. So it looks like things are going to be busy again. So that's why, just urging everybody, we can't predict that landfall ahead of time, but a busy season means your chances are up. And whether it's 30 storms or 14, the new average, or there's one, if it hits you, it's a busy season.
In an attempt to get out ahead of more storms, the National Hurricane Center and its forecasters are planning to debut new information this season.
Everything here is being accelerated, and the manifestation of that is we're going to upgrade our storm surge modeling system 2 years ahead of schedule. We originally, the upgrade that we're going to put in play this season was originally scheduled for 2023. But given the demands of the season and the pandemic, we're going to go ahead and do it 2 years early.
The modeling system is forecasting the depth of storm surge up to 2.5 days in advance.
A storm surge in its simplest form is the strong winds of a hurricane literally just shoving the water onto normally dry ground, or as in the case in your area, up rivers and into tributaries.
Which might bring to mind the record flooding of downtown Jacksonville during Irma in 2017. It's hoped warnings for such extreme storms will be even better.
It's a more accurate prediction system with these upgrades, but the most important thing is greater lead time. Typically, our real-time storm surge predictions were limited to about 48 hours prior to arrival of a hurricane. That had to do with the limits of predictability. But with this new upgrade, we're going to push for, in some circumstances, 60 hours of lead time.
That's critical, since water is often the big killer and sometimes the most damaging.
90% of fatalities in tropical systems occurs from water. Please be prepared. Prepare for that water, the danger. That doesn't mean the wind's not a big threat and life-threatening, but historically it's the water that kills.
And we're in year 2 of COVID-19.
Hurricanes and a pandemic are contradictory in their response. One you stay home for, the other you typically run away from. That came to a head in 2020. And while certainly things are better with vaccines out there, still we won't have 100% vaccination this season. So that's our biggest focus.
One word of caution: be very careful about making evacuation decisions based on past storms.
People use their past hurricane experience, whatever it was, to define the future hurricane experience. And every one of them, especially when it comes to flooding, is going to be totally unique. In fact, one's experience and memory actually hurts them, which is counterintuitive. In every other aspect of life, your experience and your memory is helpful. But because the flood footprint for every hurricane is so unique, past hurricanes often, give people a sense of how it might play out, which is unrealistic. When it comes to hurricanes, if you could just let go of the past, let go of your past memories, and take the current forecast what the Weather Service and what our partners in the media are conveying as the actual risk for this storm, you'll do so much better.
Last but not least, preparation, as always, is the key.
I think the biggest thing is be prepared. I know we're having this conversation. We have it towards the season and early. I just urge everybody, please know your risk. If you're near a river, if you're near the coast, wherever you live, know your risk and write a plan to mitigate that risk, and do it now. It's too stressful during a storm. Do it early. It's the right time to plan.
Big thanks to the National Hurricane Center, always willing to help us out and for us to be able to reach out to them and talk to them. Staying calm and being prepared is important when it comes to storms. You just heard us talk about it there. You'll hear us talk about it throughout the entire Hurricane Center. Really critical with talking and preparing with your family and the kids in your family. You also heard the hurricane director mention La Nina. So let's talk about that Pacific phenomenon. Corey?
Yeah, Mike, as you well know, La Nina can impact the weather around the world, but more importantly for us here in Northeast Florida and Southeast Georgia, hurricane seasons can be more active like what we saw last year. Let's head back to the chief. First Alert Chief Meteorologist Mike Burrish explains.
La Nina is a weather phenomenon that occurs thousands of miles away from Jacksonville, but it can affect our weather in a big way. So we head to the Pacific, where the La Nina does its thing, which is a cooling of sea surface temperatures a little either way of the equator. The current La Nina began last year during the late winter and spring and has continued well into this year. Typical impacts for our area include a drier than average spring, which can lead to a serious wildfire season followed by an active hurricane season. La Nina conditions can change global weather patterns. There's typically sinking air over the Pacific, causing drier conditions, while there's a tendency for rising air and more rain over the Atlantic. Forecast models indicate this second-year La Nina should slowly weaken through midsummer. This would imply a potentially slow start to our wet season, and while the La Nina may be mostly dissipated by the peak of the hurricane season in September, there may very well still be some impact, leading to a higher number of tropical storms and hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin.
All right, Mike mentioned it. The La Nina weakened through the spring, with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, declaring neutral water conditions by mid-May. But with at least some cool water lingering, La Nina-like conditions could continue well into the hurricane season.
Corey, drones could soon help improve forecasting the intensity of hurricanes. Here is a deeper look at how they will be used this hurricane season.
Overall, a really successful start to this new technology.
NOAA Corps Test Pilot Lieutenant Commander Adam Abbottball confirms to Action News Jax the test flights for the newest drone hurricane hunting technology have been off to a great start. This hurricane season, drones will be released into the eye of a hurricane, focusing on the area where storms get their energy, about 2,000 to 3,000 feet above the surface of the ocean. This is the most dangerous part of the storm for hurricane hunters, so often it isn't sampled by the aircraft data.
It is a place that has a dearth of information. We cannot collect this information very well.
Right now we use dropsondes, which are sensors that are released from a NOAA aircraft to the ocean surface, collecting data in a hurricane. They give meteorologists a snapshot of the weather conditions. But imagine a better view, a continuous flow of data in a hurricane. The drones can ideally collect data for 3 hours and can cover distances of 265 miles from the point of launch.
The lead NOAA scientist for the project, Dr. Joe Cione, says situational awareness will be the immediate impact from the drones.
What is going on with the storm right then? So that's important to forecasters and emergency managers who have to make critical life and death decisions about evacuation or not evacuating.
Dr. Cione says that the longer-term goal is more accurate data for forecast models, which will hopefully lead to better hurricane intensity forecasts.
Well, the World Meteorological Organization has made some changes when it comes to naming tropical storms and hurricanes as we go through this season. Let's first talk about the names that have been retired. Dorian from 2019. Typically, if the names are going to be retired, that's done each year. But because of COVID last year, it was delayed. But Dorian from 2019, such a devastating storm for the Bahamas, and we'll hear more about it just a little bit later on. So that name's retired. From last year, Laura, powerful Cat 4 hurricane that hit Louisiana. We've got a great story, interesting story coming from that storm as well here in the next few minutes. Ada from last year, and then Iota. Those names you'll never hear again. But actually, when we're talking about the Greek alphabet, you'll never hear the Greek alphabet either. That's been withdrawn totally. It was decided by the World Meteorological Organization that was just too confusing for folks. We've only run out of names twice, by the way. 2005 was the previous time, and then, of course, last year, although the naming convention didn't really begin until the 1950s. So you won't hear the Greek alphabet anymore. There's a supplemental list of names now that's going to be used if indeed we do exhaust the first list of names.
Mike, when a storm is approaching our area, many of us rush to the store to grab essentials like groceries, batteries, plywood, just to name a few. But have you ever scrambled for hay?
Here we go, y'all.
As Hurricane Laura had its eye on the Gulf Coast back in August of 2020, Richard Falk in Lake Charles, Louisiana, knew it was time to prepare.
I just built my hay. And I was going to put it up, and I realized I needed to board it up some windows. And I said, well, let me just go ahead and use my hay and see how that goes. And I just went on and never stopped. It covered the whole house.
Hurricane Laura made landfall in the early morning hours of August 27th near Cameron, Louisiana, as a Category 4 storm. Maximum sustained winds were estimated to be 150 miles per hour, according to the National Hurricane Center, just shy of a Category 5. Storm surge was as high as 15 feet in some neighborhoods. The storm left behind an estimated $19 billion in damage.
Really couldn't hear much in the house because the hay it's like an airbag, and it took all the wind and everything. I climbed up one of my hay bales and got on my roof and videoed some of it coming in for a while. It probably was blowing about 70 at the time, 60 at the time, something like that.
The one big question, though.
And did it work?
Yes, sir. It worked twice.
And did homes around your area that weren't protected by this hay bale structure, were they damaged more than, say, your home?
Oh, yes, sir. I had my neighbor directly across the street, they got hit pretty hard.
As unusual as this wall of hay looked, it may have very well bailed him out from significant damage.
So just a vent or two on my house, you could hear it whistling a little bit in the house, but not much. I'm going to be cutting in May, and then again in June, and again in August. So I'll have about 180, 200 bales to go around my property.
A different kind of hurricane supplies that hopefully won't need to be stacked up again this year.
Interesting story, huh? You never know. Hey, after disasters, you're used to seeing help from all corners of the world. The Salvation Army, well, it's one such organization, but the nonprofit is in need of volunteers this year to help with the disaster assistance. Here's how you can get involved. All right, Major. Well, the Salvation Army put out a statement just a little while ago saying, hey, we are in need of volunteers for our disaster preparedness campaign as we get into the hurricane season. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, Mike. As you know, we're entering into the hurricane season, June 1st. Looks like there's already something out there in the ocean spurring up already. But anyway, a little early. But the Salvation Army, as most individuals know, I think that we are an emergency disaster response team. We're blessed to have the resources here in Jacksonville of a mobile feeding canteen that we call. It's a feeding truck and able to produce at least 1,500 meals a day, provide hydration as well as emotional and spiritual care. And so we made a concerted effort to reach out this preseason, the hurricane season, to try to recruit men and women who would love and be willing to be part of a response team with the Salvation Army for any local disasters, be they hurricanes or whatever, as well as regional disasters. And so we're just trying to have the manpower, if you would, to be able to go and respond on a moment's notice.
Yeah, it's a tough calling, but it's a necessary one, Major, and we really appreciate everything that the Salvation Army does. What's the website? Where can people go to volunteer to help with disaster services, Major? Yeah,
Mike, it's Salvation Army, NEFL.org. Salvation Army, NEFL for Northeast Florida.org. They can go on that website and see opportunities to volunteer, as well as other opportunities that are there, but specifically for to go on our website to see about our disaster services. They can go on that website, and we'd love to be in touch with them. I know there are many persons that would really love to be involved, and we would like to give them an opportunity to be of service in this fashion.
Well, it's a unique and a special calling, and it certainly is necessary too, Major. We appreciate your work, your wife's work as well, and everybody there at the Salvation Army. Thank you, Major.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Doing the most good. Once again, here's how you can volunteer for our local Salvation Army. Visit the website on your screen right now. That's salvationarmyflorida.org/volunteer.
The point of this program is to make sure you're informed and prepared for hurricane season. As we just saw with the Salvation Army, there are other ways you can help our entire community get ready and even save lives in the process. Action News Jax anchor Tanika Hughes explains how collecting blood is essential.
Water, flashlights, non-perishable foods, important documents, and medicine. Just some of the key items you need to gather for your hurricane survival kit. There's also an important resource you can give that could be critical in helping others if we're impacted by severe weather this hurricane season. A blood donation. I talked to Bright Whitaker, Director of Communications and Outreach for the nonprofit community blood bank Life South.
And we know that the season starts on June the 1st, and you guys are trying to, again, sound the alarm to say, hey, we need these donations. How soon can someone start to give blood to make sure that we're okay or in a good starting point come June 1st?
Well, blood is good for 42 days. So again, that's not a long time. And that's why we need donors every day. And the more that we can have donors come in prior to hurricanes affecting our area, the better.
Because once the season is underway, Whitaker says it brings additional challenges.
Not only do we have hurricane season, but we also have the summer months. And like you said, we have inclement weather anytime that can cause accidents. And we have illnesses that they need blood transfusions all the time. So it is a really difficult season for blood donation and making sure our hospitals have what they need for their patients.
Whitaker hopes people make the choice to donate blood on a regular basis, and keep in mind you can make a whole blood donation every 56 days. Tanika Hughes, CBS 47 and Fox 30, Action News Jax.
Life South says its donation centers and buses have COVID safety precautions in place. And if you're interested in donating blood, go to actionnewsjax.com and click on the action button to find a blood drive near you.
Okay, guys, you hear us talk about it all the time, every single year. Insurance, not the sexiest topic. Let me tell you, I just bought a new home, and my goodness, what a hassle when dealing with insurance. Not just home insurance, but flood insurance too. Some of the same questions I had about insurance, I took to an expert for you.
Hurricane season brings the threat for flooding rain and strong wind to the entire coast of the United States. But water can be a problem well inland. Mark Goldwich with Gold Star Adjusters says that you can be impacted by flooding even if you're nowhere near a body of water.
But you can get flooding from the street. It doesn't have to come from the body of water that's around you. It can come from other areas. Sometimes your home can flood and your next door neighbor's home not flood. And typically, if flood reaches, your property, just touches your property and touches the fence line, that's technically considered flood, although you wouldn't normally think of it that way. But it can happen, and it does.
Goldwich suggests you get the conversation started before hurricane season. Consider wind coverages on your insurance and keep tight records of valuables and documents.
You want to be in touch with your agent before the season starts. Make sure that you have the right policy in place, the right coverages, the right limits, the right deductibles that's right for you. And if you don't have flood insurance, you want to talk about that. Then talk about the wind coverages that you do have. You want to photograph everything around your property, inside and outside, so that it can be documented in the event of a storm. And you want to keep a copy of this safely, whether it's stored online somewhere else. But obviously, you don't want to just have it on a CD that's in the house that can get damaged or destroyed or lost in an event like that.
You can decide year by year if you want to add flood insurance to your policy. But Goldwich has seen people impacted by flood without insurance too many times.
But can you imagine you having a flood in that year that you didn't spend a couple of bucks to get the flood insurance? I cannot tell you how many people I run into who have been flooded. And the answer is so common. I didn't think I needed flood insurance. I wasn't in a flood zone. My mortgage company didn't require me to have flood insurance.
Goldwich says knowledge is the most important thing and that it's okay to ask questions.
Most homeowners are very unaware of insurance and insurance claims. The more knowledge that you have before the event, it's like a checklist. The more comfortable you are during and after the event, the better prepared you're going to be, because these events have a really long tail.
All right, so when buying flood insurance, there are 3 things to keep in mind that could help you save money. First, consider private flood insurance. It could be cheaper, and you may be able to buy it through your home or car insurance provider. Second, adjust your property. Elevating your property or installing flood openings could help reduce your flood insurance costs. And lastly, look into federal grants. FEMA offers a number of them, and they could help cover the cost of projects that can lead to an insurance discount.
Good information, Mr. Sima. Each storm helps us learn more about how to make our homes and our businesses stronger. We've seen that time and time again with each storm. You hate to see storms hit anywhere, but we learn so much structurally, meteorologically. We've seen it happen time and time again, starting really with, I would say, Andrew back in 1992.
And the building codes have significantly gotten better. And Mike, the Federal Alliance for Safe Homes is a great organization to help folks prepare each and every hurricane season and also for other natural disasters. And I recently spoke with Leslie Chapman Henderson, the president and CEO of Flash, about what you can do this year.
I want to zero in on one in particular because it's so easy to understand. It's called a sealed roof deck, because shingles will blow off in high wind, but we want to keep the deck itself underneath the shingles with a little extra water barrier, right? Research from our friends in the insurance industry tell us that when you lose your shingles and you have wind-driven rain like in a hurricane, you're going to get 9 bathtubs worth of water per minute. Wow. So you want that roof deck sealed, and for $500 or even less, you can do that.
Yeah, and Mike, I wanted to show you what Leslie was talking about in terms of a sealed roof deck and what happens when you have one and when you don't have one potentially. This is video after a test by the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. That's IBHS, you can see right there. This is up in South Carolina, a test facility. This is what it looked like without the sealed roof deck here. This is basically sealing that crevice in the seal, basically, of your roof. Yeah. And that helps protect water intrusion into the home. So you can see right here, Mike, definitely some damage.
So telling. And this is really interesting, Garrett. These cans, so-called light cans in the ceiling. When I visited Hurricane Michael in the Panhandle, and there was a home right there on the beach that was hurricane, not proof, but resistant. And he can remember those cans literally shaking. He said that he was so close to compromising his home, but he survived in this case. But you can see what happens. And any intrusion, anything that allows air in your home, and it could be the electric cans in the ceiling, it could be a garage door, which is more common, of course, it could be windows. Once you've compromised the home, the business, the structure, and you've let air in, you're in trouble. That is the most critical thing, is to keep anything that's possible that from an air standpoint, wind, out of the
And so what they did with this test, one side with sealed roof deck, one side without. Here's what it looked like with our next video with a sealed roof deck. And you can see some of the debris flying over from the other side there on the floor. But all in all, a much better scenario and much drier scenario, too.
We've come a long ways, no doubt about that. We've learned a lot since 1992. Andrew, in particular, how to deal with Mother Nature. And mitigation, Garrett, is so critical. On the front end, it costs a little extra, and Leslie mentioned that. And by the way, Flash, awesome organization.
Yeah, that she mentioned you can also perhaps get somebody to put some caulking if your house is already built in the roof, and a little bit cheap, about $500 or so, depending on the contractor with this.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a whole lot of money. Yeah, it's a little more expensive on the front end, and if you start from new construction, you can kind of blend that into your loan, hopefully, and whatnot. But the upshot, the dollar saved, is on the back end.
Yeah.
And it can be a lot of dollars.
And the sealed roof deck is part of the code starting this year. So if you're about to build a home, then you will most likely have that from your builder. And Mike, one of the other points that Leslie pointed out was a lot of folks moving into Northeast Florida and Southeast Georgia and hurricane-prone locations every year. And she says it's critical for them to not be caught off guard the first year that they have to potentially survive a storm, right?
Every year we have people that for them, it's the first time they came under hurricane watch or possibly a warning. And so we can't overlook the basics. And so I think we're really getting good at driving home those hurricane strong basics. Are you in an evacuation zone? Yes, no. If you are, you need to know where you're going to go. And having those steps ready. What encourages me a lot these days is that I think there's recognition that we have to build it right in the first place. And Florida's a leader in doing that, but we have to not have this situation where storms come, homes are damaged, and then we just build it back the same way. So I think the public has embraced that idea too, and they're asking us, hey, what can I do differently? And it is encouraging to me to, save the lives first, but we want to save your home too.
And Florida, a perfect example of that here, and Southeast Georgia, to be hurricane strong. They have a great website you can go to right after you're finished watching this here. That's hurricanestrong.org. Mike, you can even type in what year your home was built, and then they tell you what you need to do perhaps to get it up to strength for this year.
Really great website. And again, they're very helpful. If you have questions, there's a place there for Q&A, and they answer you very quickly. And Leslie does a great job with that organization, obviously, too.
All right, you guys, when storms are approaching or moving in, the difference between a watch and a warning can be a little bit confusing. I have behind me here really breaking it down. So remember, a watch means conditions are favorable for severe weather possible within pretty much 48 hours. But if a warning is issued, in the case of a tropical storm, winds of 39 to 73 miles per hour can be expected within 36 hours. And a hurricane warning, winds of 74 miles per hour or higher are forecast within 36 hours, Corey.
Yeah, Alyssa, hurricanes have been impacting Florida since well before satellites and video cameras. Still pictures and stories, though, last forever. I sat down with author Willie Dry, who told me about the meteorology, politics, and social issues surrounding the storm of the century.
The Labor Day hurricane of 1935 is the strongest hurricane ever to strike the United States, making landfall in the Middle Keys of Florida. Author Willie Dry has carefully chronicled the events surrounding the so-called storm of the century.
Came ashore with winds that probably sustained winds that had reached at least 185 miles an hour. They did some reevaluation on this storm a few years ago, determined that it was really even a little bit stronger than they originally thought.
In 1932, when Herbert Hoover was president, then again in 1933 when Franklin Roosevelt was in the White House, World War I veterans marched on Washington, D.C. in hopes of being paid a bonus that they had been promised for their war service. FDR tried to come up with a solution.
But he did sincerely want to help them, and when his administration officials learned that Key West, Florida, was on the skids and had gone bankrupt, they decided to try to convert Key West from a kind of rundown little fishing village into a tourist attraction. They decided that they wanted to build a highway down there so that people could drive down from Miami, and they sent the veterans down there to build a bridge as part of that highway.
In the 30s, there was only one way to get to the Keys. That was by train. The plan was for an evacuation train to be sent to pick up the veterans if a storm threatened. But in 1935, the train was sent as the Labor Day hurricane moved in, woefully late, according to Dry.
By the time it got down there, the worst part of the storm was coming ashore, and the eye of the storm arrived really a few minutes after the train arrived at Islamorada, Florida, and blew the train off the tracks. The only thing that was left standing was the locomotive, which weighed about 160 tons. The passenger cars, there were 3 or 4 passenger cars, weighed about 120 tons each, and a couple of box cars that weighed 75 tons each. They were just blown off the tracks like they were toys. And I think I mentioned this a moment ago, somewhere around 260 veterans were killed. The total official death toll is 408.
Technology in the 1930s was far more primitive than today. Known at that time as the U.S. Weather Bureau, forecasters were unsure where the storm was and believed the hurricane would make landfall near Havana, Cuba. So meteorologists in Cuba sent up the first ever hurricane hunter to find the storm. Leonard Povey was an American-born pilot training Cuban fighter pilots, and he found the hurricane, but nowhere near where the U.S. Weather Bureau thought it was.
Leonard Povey gets into this little open cockpit biplane fighter and takes off from the Havana airport and flies out over the Straits of Florida looking for a hurricane. And he finds it. And it's about 60 miles north of the position that was being plotted by the U.S. Weather Bureau.
The unfortunate outcome was a powerful hurricane making landfall faster and much farther north than expected. In the aftermath, FDR's administration and the Department of Veterans Affairs conducted investigations. Dry says that FDR's investigator used the phrase, quote, act of God, while the VA blamed the FDR administration. A Roosevelt ally, John Rankin, introduced a bill to allow a congressional investigation and compensation to the victims' families.
Rankin was able to present this so-called investigation, act of God, and Congress, of course, passed the bill to compensate the victims' families, and that did pretty well put the issue to rest.
All right, Alma Pender Dalton was the oldest survivor of the Labor Day hurricane, and Dry tells me she actually passed away earlier this spring. Dry also tells me that Ms. Dalton was also in the Keys when Hurricane Irma blew through in 2017, and Ms. Dalton called Irma, quote, nothing. So think about the impacts that we had with Irma here in Northeast Florida compared to that of the Labor Day hurricane of 1935. So that's some crazy perspective there. Dry told me, Mike, that Hurricane Andrew back in '92 inspired him to write the book, The Storm of the Century. That's the title of the book, the name monikered by the storm. And you've read it. I need to read it.
Yeah,
I need to read it.
We all do.
Yeah.
It's a great read. I mean, whether or not you're a weather fanatic like all of us are, a historical nut, whatever the case might be, it's a really good read. It kind of interweaves all that stuff. And you know, a lot of the Weather Bureau information at that time was coming out of Jacksonville, which many people didn't even realize.
And Dry tells me one of the decisions to send the evacuation train came from Jacksonville.
Came from Jacksonville, exactly right. And unfortunately, as we just heard there, it was too late. A lot of historical parallels that are kind of unsettling to Corey. I mean, this is 1935. You think, okay, we learn from history, right? And if we don't, we're condemned to repeat it. Well, here we go. We fast forward to maybe, say, 2005 and Katrina and some other natural disasters and hurricanes that we've had in the past. And you will be amazed at some of the parallels that you see more recently that occurred way back in the fairly early part of the 20th century. Another little interesting side note, Corey, famous author Ernest Hemingway was in Key West then and took his yacht all the way up into the Middle Keys to help with some relief supplies. So a lot of interesting things coming out of that book.
All right, improvements in technology have made our hurricane track forecasts as accurate as they have ever been. Despite this progress, there are still challenges, especially with hurricane intensity forecasts. But now there's a possible scientific breakthrough: ocean gliders.
NOAA is deploying gliders in the ocean, which will increase data collection by 50%. With more data collected, it could be a major step in improving the accuracy of hurricane intensity forecasts. Ocean gliders are unmanned underwater vehicles that can be easily placed in the ocean safely and at a relatively low cost. A signal is sent locally from a vessel or remotely from a satellite, setting the glider on its journey. During the immersion, the glider collects data like salinity, ocean temperatures, and oxygen. The glider goes up and down from the ocean surface to 1,000 meters deep, covering roughly 15 miles a day. Warm ocean water, especially if it's deep, warm water, will act as a fuel for hurricanes. I spoke with NOAA scientist Grant Rawson about the research.
So the gliders help better represent the ocean. We haven't been able to collect ocean data during a hurricane because you don't want to be out there on a boat trying to collect data while a hurricane's bearing down on you. So until these gliders came around, there was really no way to get ocean data, a lot of ocean data, into the forecast model.
The goal is to improve hurricane intensity forecasts, which will lead to better warnings and evacuation plans for people living along the coast.
Interesting stuff ahead on the advances in technology and forecasting. Really something to see. And of course, Alyssa giving us sort of an eye-opening view there. When I was in college, it was just a few years ago. Now wait a minute, it wasn't that long ago. I had the opportunity to do some storm chasing. So when I heard about Jim Edds, the hurricane chaser, I felt compelled to hear some of those stories.
Years ago, Jim Edds was bored with his day job. His fascination with the weather turned his full-time job into chasing hurricanes. And one of his first successful and most memorable storm chases was in 2004. Infamous Hurricane Charlie, the strongest hurricane to hit Florida since Andrew in 1992.
Best I could do was outside an eye doctor's office. It's easy to get out of the wind, but you got to remember, if you get the eye, that wind is going to come out of another direction, and it's probably going to be blowing at you. So the wind's going over me at first, and I'm seeing all this stuff flying through the air, and I'm going like, whoa, I've never seen that before. It's just sheet metal was coming in and whacking things, and windows were blowing out. The shutter above me, that fell down, and it was just swirling dirt.
Jim travels far and wide to get the money shot of powerful storms, including a trip to the Bahamas and the slow-moving monster Dorian in 2019.
It was a two-story villa. I think it had 4 rooms and 8 with the second floor. For some reason, that place didn't collapse. Everything else collapsed.
This is Jim's watch in the eye of Dorian, showing an incredibly low pressure of 911 millibars. That's lower than Andrew and Michael when they made landfall in Florida.
Dorian was scary when it, I told everybody, I said, look, ain't nothing going to be left after 185 with gusts of 220. It's so loud and things start shaking, you go, oh boy, yeah, it's going to come off. The roof. If the roof comes off, then you're a real goner because the walls are going to go down. So we had 2 problems, the surge and the wind. And that's pretty scary. And then we got stuck there for a long time.
Back closer to home, Hurricane Michael just 3 years ago, an intense Cat 5 hurricane that wrecked the central Florida panhandle. But Jim set out that one as he felt it was just too unsafe.
There were guys that literally thumbed their way back home because they just didn't get it.
That's a good point. You do have to be smart about it. Exactly. This isn't just fun and games. These are very dangerous storms that Mother Nature throws at us. Why do you do it, Jim?
It keeps me from that boring day job working for the state of Florida.
For all the adrenaline that a big storm provides, Jim has some words of wisdom.
After the storm, stay inside. Don't go wandering out. There have been people electrocuted after a storm. Maybe it's not so bad, but when you go wandering around, that's really, really dangerous.
And he understands the difficulty for survivors.
Recovering from a hurricane is a painful experience, and I feel for people that have to go through that.
Jim chases tornadoes too, most recently chasing early spring tornadoes in Mississippi and Alabama. You can see more of his storm chase video at extremestorms.com.
Always fun to watch his videos during significant hurricanes. Now, the Jacksonville Beach pier, the reconstruction of it won't be done for at least another year. There was damage, of course, back in 1999 from Hurricane Floyd, and then about a dozen years later from Hurricane Matthew in 2016. And then a year later, we had Hurricane Irma come up to our west. And there is construction going on here in 2021. You can see this camera looking out straight into the Atlantic with a couple of cranes there. And this is what it looked like in terms of construction so far. You can see this video that we've shot there with what it looks like. Two different structures there that they're building the current pier there. So Action News Jack's Lorena Enclan has more on why this project is moving so slowly.
Jacksonville beachgoers like Michael Tefera are ready to get their fishing pier back.
I really hope it's done by next week, but I know that's not really realistic.
Try another 52 weeks. City Councilman Rory Diamond tells me construction work should wrap up by spring of 2022.
We should have been done at the end of this year with the pier, completely done, but COVID set us back with our federal permits, in particular our environmental permits.
Beachgoers and fishermen haven't been able to get on the pier for more than a year now. It closed back in November of 2019 to begin renovations. Now you can only go underneath the pier if you use this access point.
You don't really relax because you hear all the hammers and crane, and it's just a little distracting.
After Hurricanes Matthew and Irma, debris fell into the water. One of the reasons it's taken so long is because divers have to remove the sand that's covering the fallen beams and piles so crews can attach rigging to them and lift them out.
All of the seafloor is being left just like it was.
Councilman Diamond tells me the project is on budget. The estimated cost is just over $10 million, but Diamond says much of it is being paid by the federal government. Once the project is finished, parts of the pier will be elevated by 8 feet in the hopes of preventing another storm from damaging it again. Michael is looking forward to creating more memories on the pier once it reopens, like this one he'll never forget.
When a random guy just caught a baby shark and everything, and we threw it back in, and we had a great time.
Lorena Enclan, CBS 47 Fox 30, Action News Jax.
We stay on our coast and now head to St. Johns County. St. Augustine is one part of our area that is no stranger to flooding during storms. Action News Jax Courtney Cole shows us the work being done to protect local homes and businesses.
The flooding during Hurricane Matthew was absolutely just unbelievable.
Even 5 years later, Virginia Whetstone's bad memories of Matthew endure. She owns the Marker 8 Hotel and Marina and had just completed a new renovation in 2016.
We had all the new furniture in the room. We were within a month of opening our doors to the public. I came over the next day. I was basically devastated. The place looked like a war zone.
But actually, it could have been worse. Some homeowners experienced a double whammy that day: high water levels and a sewage spill.
I plugged the main sewer line, so I did not have sewer backing up into my properties.
To try to prevent that in the future, the city's been fixing up 13 of its 94 lift stations, vital pieces of its wastewater system.
St. Augustine is known to be one of the hardest hit areas during hurricane season. This is actually what it looked like in downtown St. Augustine during Hurricane Matthew. You can see the flooding can get pretty bad, and so upgrading these lift stations will help to protect against future flood damage.
When they were damaged during the hurricanes, how did that affect neighbors?
When that happens, if you guys continue to wash your hands, flush the toilets, take showers, which normally do, that waste will gather here and eventually could stage up and come out of the wet well above ground, spilling into the environment.
Stephen Slaughter, St. Augustine's engineering manager, says the 13 stations being upgraded were the ones damaged during Matthew.
That's really important because people don't realize it. If you don't have sewer, then you have nowhere for your water to go.
As a contractor, property owner, and former St. Augustine Mayor Lynn Weeks says he knows firsthand just how important this project is for the city.
And it's going to be a really long-term solution because the city's wastewater treatment facility is down at the end of Riberia Street. And they're looking at ways of hardening that now and raising it up.
The project also includes a pipeline in Davis Shores to transport wastewater from one lift station to another. The city is paying just under $2 million for the work. FEMA and the state of Florida are picking up the rest of the total $14 million cost. Courtney Cole, CBS 47, Fox 30. Action News Jax.
It is vital to know your hurricane evacuation zone, and it is so easy to find by heading to our website, actionnewsjax.com/weather/hurricane. Now, if you head here, you can find everything from the hurricane preparation guide to even active storms that we're tracking. Now, to find your zone, you have to scroll towards the bottom of the page, all right here, past the hurricane names list, and it shows the Florida evacuation zones. And if you scroll a little bit farther down, it actually shows the routes. But of course, we want to focus on the zones. This is showing the whole entire state of Florida. There's a box right there where you can type in an address or a place. You, of course, would want to type in your address, but I will put in something broad like Neptune Beach, Florida. Now, as it zooms into the location, it shows different colors for the zone. So for those of you into Neptune Beach, as I click right here, it searches, press the side button. Neptune Beach is in evacuation zone A. Now, if I exit out, you can see Atlantic Beach is in a little bit of a different color. So I click right here. For those of you inland into Atlantic Beach, to know your zone, you are evacuation zone B. Now, when to evacuate, you might be wondering. First, of course, you need to know your zone, then follow instructions from local or state officials because they will provide the latest recommendations to keep you and your family safe. If you want to find this, head to actionnewsjax.com/weather/hurricane.
All right, guys, a lot of information we've covered today that's so crucial to preparing for hurricanes. It's also available in Spanish for our Spanish-speaking community. Action News Jax Lorena Inclán walks us through how to find hurricane prep resources in Spanish on our website.
Queremos que todos ustedes tengan la información que necesitan durante la temporada de huracanes. Así que aquí en Action News Jax hemos creado una sección de nuestra página web exclusivamente en español para todos ustedes y les voy a enseñar cómo encontrarla. Esta es nuestra página web, actionnewsjax.com. Cuando lleguen aquí van a ir a esta parte que dice Sections, secciones. Van a cliquear en esa parte y después van a ir a Weather, que es el segundo, y le va a salir este menú que ven aquí. Y de pronto van a ver hacia abajo que dice Preparando para la tormenta. Por favor, hagan clic en esa parte de ahí y les va a salir la página completa que yo misma les escribí para ustedes y es todo en español acerca de cómo prepararse para una tormenta. Ahí también va a poder encontrar información de la zona de evacuación y otra información que es muy importante que sepan para que estén preparados.
Our team has also put together a 2021 hurricane preparation guide as a one-stop shop for all your preparation needs. This thing is about 10 to 15 pages long. It's got emergency contacts, what to do with your pets, and a hand-signed note from Jacksonville's chief meteorologist, Mike Burrish. So you can download that at actionnewsjax.com. That's the thing, you can download it so it can be on all your devices.
Yeah, collector's item there. And so, you know, as we often say, now is the time to prepare for storms. We don't want you to wait until a storm is right on your doorstep.
And you can count on us, the First Alert Weather Team, to keep you updated, as the chief likes to say, round the clock.
That's right. And tune into CBS 47 and Fox 30 or log on to actionnewsjax.com and download the free First Alert Weather mobile app.
And I'll be writing Talking the Tropics, easy for me to say, with Mike every single day during the hurricane season. A no-nonsense update of what's going on in the tropics and how any storms will be affecting us right here at home and how we believe it's going to occur and move and develop and change or not and all that kind of stuff. You'll get all that information. So on behalf of the First Alert Weather Team, stay informed and stay safe this storm season. With all the weather all the time, I'm Chief Meteorologist Mike Burrish.
This has been an Action News Jax First Alert Weather Special, the ins and outs of hurricane season.